So good morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a nice weekend. We will get started. I know time is of the essence. So starting today's meeting, we want to review our November 4th joint committee meeting minutes. So hopefully you've had time to review them. Are there any changes or comments or any discussion that you would like to have? All right, hearing none. I need one motion to approve.
I think you were all there.
So moved. This is Jim.
Second,
I'll second it, Josh.
any opposed? The rest are all in favor? I see heads nodding.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, the meeting minutes are official. So we did have our second public workshop. I just want to give a really brief review of the workshop. So we did have 13 attendees. We had 2 who came live to our event in person and 11 who were virtual. And so while we gave a progress report on the overall study itself, we went over the goals, the purpose, and where we are to date, including an update on all of our, I'll say the parts to the study thus far. The bulk of the study was really to go over the issues that we have found during our analysis, as well as potential mitigation strategies. So we did go over that both in person and virtually, and the issue board that you'll see today has been updated with all of those comments that we received. So we're working with the latest up to the minute information. And so the bulk of our meeting today, we really just want to get through the remaining issues, but also revisit the ones that we visited last time. So hopefully we can get through all of them today. In an effort to do that, we are kind of revising today's meeting from what we did last time. So last time we presented 55 issues. We have condensed them per this group's request. We now have 32 active issues. So we reworded some, we combined some we all agreed were not necessarily relevant, and so 1 or 2 were removed from the analysis. So today we're working with 32 active issues, and we'll have roughly 75 minutes to get through all of them. So Jen Wrights is going to keep a timer. So we will do 2 minutes per issue. Now, more than likely, we will not resolve those issues in those 2 minutes. But at the end of our 2 minutes, I am asking for someone from this group, or if it needs to be someone identified who's one of the stakeholder agencies, but not necessarily present today, and we can't volunteer them for all of them. But if it does make sense for someone outside of those present today to kind of take the reins on that issue, what we want to do is between now and December 13th, we'll work on that together outside of this meeting, just so that we can get through them all, keep it brief for today, but really take a deep dive as we leave today. So I'm asking for that champion for that issue, as well as myself and obviously Nabila and others who need to be involved. We'll coordinate outside of this, and I'm asking for all information to come back by December 13th. So what am I looking for to come back? We're looking for possible mitigation strategies for each of the issues that we're talking about today. Also, if there are any issues that, as we go along, you think are not accounted for in our 32 issues, then please identify those, and we'll get those added to our list to work through. And so then by December 13th, we'll have all of our issues, possible mitigation strategies. And so then Century will have about 2 weeks to process those and put it into the draft report that we will be sending around by the end of the month. So I think that can work schedule-wise with the holidays that we have. And, it starts closer you get to those holidays, the more it's a skeleton crew for all of us. And so I think that time frame will give us ample time to get everything situated and ready to go. And so if there are any questions, I'll pause for a moment. Otherwise, we'll jump right in. So Jen has agreed to share the file because we are having some technical difficulties. And so let me see if I can. All right, so we are looking at the same thing now. So great, this is wonderful. So our first issue, so we'll set the clock at 2 minutes. We probably won't be finished speaking in 2 minutes, but then we'll identify someone who can sort of work with us individually to work through these issues. So limiting people in the area of the clear zone. So what we want to look at is, we have 4 areas of clear zone surrounding the base. And, what do we need to do to ensure that as future development comes in, or changes in development, or even a chance to look at things that are currently already in the clear zone. For example, where Bergold Lane ties into the roadway surrounding the base, that intersection is actually within the clear zone. So do we need to, so some issues or some mitigation strategies that we thought about was, develop a plan to eliminate access, whether it's a 5, 10, 15-year plan as Berghold Lane needs some, just saying that one, for example, as that needs improvements, as that needs, a repave or a pave and rehab or something like that, do we schedule that for an actual concept plan for how we can realign it outside of the clear zone and tie back into the roadway outside of that? So what are your thoughts on limiting people in the area of the clear zone? Obviously, we have a major highway going through, Route 1, portions of it are in the clear zone. That's not going to move, but thoughts on plan-wise, long-term planning, what we can do, and who might champion that plan or series of plans.
If Route 1 is in the clear zone, then Bergold Lane is the non-issue.
So Jen, if you can go to the map, the Dover Air Force Base mapping, do you have that as a separate tab?
Oh, hold on, I might have to.
We can look at the clear zone versus the roads that are there.
1 second, I had it and then things moved around on me.
And then if you click the green circle, they're the layers at the bottom.
Yep.
And then you can click off the study area, that first check mark, and put one in right next to the arrow of Dover Air Force Base, right to the right of that. Yep, right in there. And then you can zoom in, and all the green areas are the clear zones. So you can see there some of the roadways that are going through. You can see Route 1 does travel for a bit on that bottom of the screen through that green area. That's Route 1. And then Berghold Lane comes in to Bayside Drive on the right clear zone, the bottom right.
It looks like Route 9 travels through the clear zone as well.
Yep.
Do you zoom in over on Horse Pond and Lafferty? I just want to make sure that none of that's in the clear zone.
So Jen, that's to the north of the Air Force Base.
Yeah. This one.
Oh, see it, yeah, there it
So
is. on the
there's
left.
Horse Pond right there.
So Horse Pond does not. I think a portion of Lafferty is, oh, there's Lafferty. Nope, Lafferty's outside of it. They're in the yellow.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
You're good, Linda.
Hey, good deal.
Okay, you want to go back to the Miro board?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
So do you see the Miro board now? Just to be,
I do, yes.
okay, great.
So I guess a question for this group is, and this might be more for Matt and Jennifer. SR1 is in the clear zone. Now, obviously, people are not stopping unless there's, a backup, but they're generally just moving through. Route 9, they're probably mostly moving through. Burkhold Lane, they're probably momentarily stopping while they're, trying to turn onto Bayside Drive. Is this, and are these specific roads an issue, or do we want to gear this discussion and this issue more towards developing a plan so that future roadways do not come into the clear zone?
Matt, we're experiencing the same technical problems with Matt again as last time, so I'm working with him to get in.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is Jennifer. I was going to say it's probably more a question for Matt than for me.
okay.
So, and they asked him to try calling in again,
Okay,
because he does.
so we could probably table this one, and I can work with Matt and Nabila. This is more than likely future development is not going to be allowed to the extent in the clear zone where there would be an entrance based on the discussions that we had at, say, the Borrow Pit interactive planning session. So it will be more a question of what can we do for these existing, probably out of the three, SR1, Route 9, and Burkhold Lane. Burkhold Lane would probably be the easiest one to look at a relocation. So I will put Matt and obviously Nabila in terms of DelDOT for discussing that one. And so we want to make sure that we clearly define our fire and EMT response. There are various fire districts within the area, and I believe they have agreements in place. But there was a question of, if there is an issue on the base, but it could spill over onto SR1, let's say, for example, or Route 9, whose issue is it, or whose, jurisdiction is it? Is this an issue we need to define? Is this something that we need to include in the study analysis?
Do we have somebody from DHS on our working group?
I know I'm pretty sure I interviewed DHS for the stakeholder interviews. I'm not positive that they're on in this working group.
No, I don't think we do have somebody on the working group itself.
Well,
But we can,
for family interest alone, why don't I take care of this?
okay,
My son's actually deputy chief out in Little Creek.
wonderful. So the next one is the BASH, the Bird Wildlife Aircraft Strike Hazard Potential. And so what we kind of learned through this study and the analysis is twofold. One is making sure that the existing areas around the Air Force Base are monitored for possible bird aircraft strikes and making sure that that's mitigated. And I believe that is happening. But the second piece to this is making sure that any changes or overlay zones, ordinances, easements, anything that we suggest to change, or anything that we say is okay and will remain the same, that it takes into account the possibility to attract birds and wildlife that could conflict with the aircraft. So the easements, I read every easement. I think there's 54, don't quote me on that number. Many of them do talk about the BASH and the allowance for the Air Force Base to come in and mitigate the birds if the landowner is not doing it. But I guess the questions would be, what is the monitoring process for that? Is it just a timed, seasonal or quarterly review of the area? How are we ensuring that this is being done? Does the landowner have to talk to the Air Force Base at certain intervals to say yes or no that they did it? If the Air Force Base doesn't hear from the landowner, then do they take it upon themselves? And then the other piece that we heard through the stakeholder interviews was, this is more tree mitigation, but when the Air Force Base or someone does come onto the property to do this, who's responsible for the cleanup in terms of tree mitigation? Who owns those trees that were taken down and what happens to them? So in terms of BASH, what is the assessment process? What changes do you think need to occur? And what monitoring could we put in place to make sure that this is occurring forever, basically? And this is probably another one that's for Matt.
Still working on that. Sorry.
If no one here has any thoughts, we could probably move on. Okay. So then the next one's over here. Try to move this around without getting everyone seasick.
Appreciate it.
So there's a concern for future frequency interference on new aircraft. So as technology changes, as radio waves change, as frequencies change, we need to make sure that that is in compliance with all state laws, all policies, FAA, etc. This includes the use of drones, which I know are very restrictive when it comes to where you can fly them and where the airspace is allowable for those. But is there a policy or process in place for monitoring that? If, for example, someone wanted to put up a new either cell tower, radio tower, something like that, how does the reviewing agency know when they need to discuss it with the Air Force Base? Has anyone seen any of these types of plans or requests?
This is Dawn from the city of Dover. So we have a permitting process for wireless communication facilities. But this question you're asking is super on the technical side that we wouldn't even begin to really regulate it. I think it's it may be regulated more at the FCC level
Okay,
in how they, how that industry works. Our biggest thing technology wise is probably related to height limitations of such facilities.
okay,
And that's got a very different, that's got a different review
Right.
process. We have permit activity all the time when they're changing out antenna equipment for the latest and greatest, but we don't really get into this frequency issue. I think the regulations are not local, if
okay,
any, in any case.
The closest you have is the DSP. They get concerned about interference on their frequencies, the 800 spectrum, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of control all of that for all the like the fire companies in their own DSP response.
okay.
That's as close as I can get.
I don't know if there's anything that Homeland Security, where that, if they have any role in this whole thing. Because drones are a whole nother scenario.
Right,
So,
yeah. Okay, I think that helps us on that one. So then, oops. So in our stakeholder interviews, we heard a lot about housing. So the neighboring municipalities or communities, such as Bowers and the others that are a part of our stakeholder group, are really necessary to support the military personnel housing. And a lot of them in our stakeholder interviews did recognize that. A lot of them are taking kind of proactive approaches to housing, putting in what they think is the right type of housing, allowing for a certain portion to be rentals in case it's more of a short-term stay, and then trying to put in affordable housing that would match the needs of the military personnel. And so, we just want to make sure that those communities continue to provide that support for the base and that they continue to recognize that as a need. And so, we think that that should be part of the comprehensive plans for the surrounding communities so that it is a goal and a priority of theirs to support the base with the different types of either growth and development or housing changes or use changes that they plan for long-term. Some of the other mitigation strategies that we heard were to do a housing survey or a market survey to determine if the needs actually do meet the inventory, and then kind of look at what could change where. So that survey would obviously be outside of this study, but it is something that an agency or the municipality could champion as a result of this plan. So I didn't know if there were any other thoughts on this or feedback. I don't think we have anyone on today who's from the municipalities.
No, I haven't seen anything.
So, Sonia, I think this one would be me, Office of State Planning,
Okay,
to potentially help coordinate this with the surrounding local governments.
okay,
But my question is, I want to be just 100% sure what I am doing before December 13th. I was a little fuzzy on that. So like,
Okay.
if I say, yes, this is me, what exactly would you need from me by the 13th?
So by the 13th, you would say, okay, I took a look at this, I brainstormed, maybe I had a couple conversations with the municipalities that, if you want Century or Nabila or whoever to be a part of, we certainly can. And so our suggestion to make sure we're meeting the needs is to do these, 5 things, or let's look into the possibility to do these 5 things, which might be, as each municipality updates their comprehensive plan, a specific goal or specific chapter is going to be meeting the needs for housing for the Air Force Base. Maybe an ordinance or something like that needs to change for affecting either density or type of housing. If, maybe the Air Force Base needs more apartments and everybody's building single family homes, is there a way to kind of move the trend into allowing for more apartments, or, and vice versa. So something like that would be just some possible mitigation strategies that we can kind of look at holistically with everything that we are proposing as part of this entire plan, and then putting it together in some more sort of, concrete mitigation strategies in the final plan.
Sounds good. I just wanted to make sure. So you're looking for potential mitigation strategies. That
Yes.
sounds like
Yes.
something that's doable. Okay, thank you.
All right. So,
And if you're asking me if I see anything to add right now, I would say no. I think it's a good start.
okay, great.
Sonia, I just want to let you know that we have Matt, and I think
Okay.
Matt, if you unmute, we should be able to hear you, and that Marilyn Smith has also joined us. She's
Oh, great.
And she should be.
Hey, good morning. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Great to see you.
Oh my God, that was pretty rough. If I could backtrack just a couple minutes here, the thing about the clear zones is that we would like not to have any signage, if possible, in the clear zone. Well, actually, in the mandatory zone of frangibility, which is a narrow sliver in the clear zone. That's what our concern is. The Air Force
Okay.
Base is concerned. And beyond that, I mean, it kind of is what it is with the roads and the traffic and stuff. But the traffic's not stopping. It's transient, so it's really,
Right.
I don't know, not that big a deal, I guess.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
Matt, this is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
What does the Air Base think of the bus shelter being put on Route 9 right outside the gate for the Air Mobility Command Museum?
The bus shelter there. I didn't realize there was a bus shelter there by the AMC Museum.
Man, I think there is.
Last time I was there, I didn't see one, but
All right.
Thanks, Jim. We can check on that and work with Matt.
Yeah, please.
Because that would be a good idea to talk about as part of our mitigation strategies when we're looking at that one. Aside from signs, are we okay with bus shelters and bus stops being there where someone, might be waiting 30 minutes, 45 minutes, however long, the bus frequency is, things like that. So I think we can brainstorm that with Matt and sort of get a list of things that we should consider long term. So that was good, Jim. Thank you.
that sounds good. Thank you.
And hi, Marilyn. Thanks for joining. Hi. So our next one is
Sonia, this is
yes.
Linda. Can we, the base housing issue?
Yes.
I just want to mention, it's not just for the Air Force Base, but we've been, hearing from a lot of employers that their employees can't find affordable housing
Okay.
within Kent. So Josh, just keep that in mind as they're going through comp plans with municipalities too.
Yeah, certainly, Linda. This is something we're working on all the time.
Right. Yeah. And it's not
this would
just the
just-
base.
Right. This would just
It's
base
broader.
housing would just be another consideration as you're looking at your housing stock
Right.
and
Okay.
and planning for that. Yeah, because there's a term called missing middle housing where where, you sort of figure, not quote unquote affordable, but just like your middle class working families can't even afford to buy a house. So, yep. So thank you.
Thanks, Linda. So the other issue that we've heard is, there's no walking paths or recreation connectivity to amenities or infrastructure that's off base. And so, there's a definite interest in connecting ultimately to the wildlife area across Route 1, but even if you wanted to kind of bike towards other areas, the infrastructure is lacking. And so, what can we do to create that infrastructure that works within all the restrictions of the area? And actually at our workshop, we received the comment, is it possible to create a path along SR1 if it was highly separated by not just width and distance, but also, maybe some fencing or some landscaping so that you inevitably couldn't really even see the path from the highway. But that would, perhaps provide a part of the missing link. And so, I think definitely thinking outside the box might help us find some additional alternatives. But mostly we just want to, take a look at this from a 10,000-foot level, from the aircraft level, and see what we can do to make some of these connections, possibly happen. So I don't know if there's anyone who thinks that, they might be able to work with us to develop some strategies to work through this.
Yeah, the Dover Air Force Base is having a transportation plan, and it seems like a lot of that is kind of on us because we're the ones that have fenced off the area between us and the outside world. So I'm not sure. I appreciate this greatly. I'm not sure how much of this should be in the compatible use plan. I mean, what's everybody's thought about this?
The only thing that we have going, we do have a study going on. We have a study going on looking at connections between east side and west side of Bay Road to get walkers back and forth, especially down around the DelDOT area. And that there's already some kind of connecting trail system from the Isaac Branch trail system, St. John's trail system, from behind DelDOT that can actually come up along Route 1, the punch and run back to Bay Road. So there are some connections, and it extends down to Route 10, all the way down to Route 10, with potential for access. So, right. it might not be connected to the base itself, but there is that kind of recreational facility available in the area. And part of this study that we're actually doing in-house, maybe we expand it a little bit to talk about connections to the Air Force Base.
So I could coordinate with you, Jim, and you, Matt, and we could just make sure that this plan and those two plans cover the entire area, and that there's not a gap or a hole, but that through one of them or multiple of them, we've got it covered. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes. Yeah. Again, it seems to be more of an Air Force's problem than anybody else's because of the limited access, the security of it.
Yep.
So it's like nothing that we could ask the county or the state. It seems like we need to put in, the Air Force Base needs to put in turnstile that reads our ID cards and fingerprints or something like that for our airmen to have access, or they need to hire more security forces or something. I don't know, to the north gate or to the housing gate.
Okay.
But again, it's our problem, not a community problem.
So the next one is the requirement for glint and glare studies for solar farms, but also the question that came up as we were working through the Borrow Pit interactive planning sessions. Are there glint and glare studies required for other things, such as, if someone were to put up multiple greenhouses or things like that, that could also be reflective? Or do we need to include that for any sort of building materials? For example, if someone were to put up a building or a structure that was, had reflective glass or reflective windows or things like that. So the first one is, the first question really is, what are the mechanisms in place so that the reviewing agencies know, oh, we got this plan or we got this request, we need to include Dover Air Force Base or DoD? But then the second one is it only for solar farms, or do we want to be a little bit more generic, trying to think long-term into the future? Could there be some other use we're not necessarily thinking of now that we would want to include in those glint and glare studies? And if so, then, what are some options for wording or categories, or, how do we get that sort of across and included in this?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. To say, solar farms and structures for highly reflective materials such as greenhouses, etc.
And so if the agencies currently get a request for this, whether it's City of Dover or county, what is your process for ensuring that there's this coordination happening? Or do we need to develop a process, or add or revise the process that's currently in place?
So this is Dawn with the City of Dover. So currently, I would say a process for requirements of a glint and glare study is very limited. There's only a brief mention of that even in our airport environs overlay zone. So I wouldn't know where to even reference somebody to say, hey, you've got to do this, and then who does it go to, who reviews it, or anything like that. So if it's going to be a requirement for a land development activity, it's going to have to become part of a zoning ordinance regulation in these jurisdictions. And I've heard the term thrown out, but beyond that, I really don't know how it works.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, this is Matt. The glint and glare study is regulated by the FAA, and that's any airport in the nation, not just military airports, but civilian airports too. I mean, so if they were putting a solar farm up within a certain distance, I don't know what that distance is, of BWI or Philadelphia, it would go through the same exact process. So I guess the FAA would be the regulatory people for that. I can try and look it up real quick to see what the requirement is.
But I'm not sure we're going to require a local development project proposal to get approval from FAA.
Only solar fields, Jim, are highly reflective. I mean, there's been 3 or 4 different solar farms proposed within Kent County in the past, I don't know, man, 3-4 years,
Well, I'm just thinking if we can lay out FAA's concerns and develop some kind of ordinance for where they can give a sample ordinance to the county and the city and whoever else is looking at it, so that they have something to refer to and some solid constraints or restrictions on those uses.
Yeah, I agree. Good point, Jim.
Yeah, I think that's what our perceived end goal was for this, was to kind of either, provide more information that could become an ordinance, or at a minimum describe, some kind of required process or something like that. So I think the first step then for this one is we will look up the FAA approval process, and then Matt, Dawn,
Yeah.
and perhaps Chris Connolly, we could work together on looking at, what we could do to mitigate that. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
So kind of a similar thing, it's just the opposite, is dark sky protection required for night training. I did move it. It's not. There we go. Matt, if maybe you could talk about the concerns with this, or is it a concern? Is it something that this plan should address? Is there a plan already in place? Is there, is there any information that you or any of the agencies could provide on this?
Yeah, actually, I have nothing for this. I'm unaware. I know what you're asking, but I'm unaware of any current requirements or requests from the base for dark skies or lack of light pollution. I just I know I have never heard any concerns, but I'll check into it definitely. I'll ask her about pilots and stuff.
This may be a non-issue, and then this might be one that can go away. So, for some of these that we haven't vetted yet from our last meeting, some of these are, no, this isn't a concern of ours, and we can cross it off the list.
Sounds good.
So then.
Great.
So the next one talks about access concerns to getting into the Air Force Base when SR1 is congested, say during, a beach weekend, holiday weekend, things like that. And then conversely, SR1 at times can get congested due to Delaware Air Force Base events. So, things that we can look at for this would be evaluating alternative access points, making sure that the Air Force Base and DelDOT are communicating, which we did learn in our stakeholder interviews. That communication is happening. It is very strong. DelDOT asks that the Air Force Base notify them as soon as they know anything that may affect traffic, so that DelDOT can put their plan into place. What has happened in the past, and it sounded like they had worked through that, was the Air Force Base was going to have an event. They notified DelDOT TMC, which is essentially the traffic control center, kind of late in the game. It was something that was happening over the weekend, and then it was a bit of a hardship for DelDOT to find people to manage the event, work the event, make sure that traffic was operating properly. And so, if there was 1 to 2 week notice or even longer or something like that in place, then DelDOT can get everything set up in time. But that was really the only piece of coordination that we heard that could, just be mentioned to continue or to be strengthened.
So I'm not sure if anything else said they're sensitive or anything like that. If you're just talking, that's fine. But I mean, they're recording the session or to bring it back into the minutes. Just as
So
far as I
Matt-
know, that DelDOT and the base work extremely well
Yes.
with putting signage up with current air shows or anything else that's going on. Like this week, we have exercise going on, so I've already seen the DelDOT signage out there.
Great. And do you think your transportation plan will address any of this?
Yes, yeah. This is I know it's more in the Air Force's responsibility to make sure that we don't schedule reserve weekends next to major traffic. And I think we've done a fairly good job. And the Air Force does not have a negative impact on the local community on State Road 1 or 9. I really don't see anything else that can be done on the off-base side. I don't know.
Okay. So this may be an issue that goes away, but Matt, I'll follow up with you just to make sure there's nothing coming out of the transportation plan that we don't want to coordinate or add in with this plan.
Yeah, it should be something like the Air Force will, make sure that, reserve weekends are not scheduled during times of peak traffic for State Road 1. So it's a little blurb or something like that.
Okay.
Hey, Sonia or Jen, did either of you know who suggested the expansion to 3 lanes?
I believe that's been in the
So-
works for quite a few years.
There was a study done a few years ago for DelDOT that looked at the capacity of SR1. And that did show that 3 lanes would help traffic capacity and delays all the way down through to I think to Milford. So that is a long-term project that DelDOT is working on to fund.
I've seen Mark Lutz's summary of that. I haven't seen an actual study yet. Thank you.
I can look for it, like if it's needed.
Only that it might bring in some timing issues.
The next one is SR1 sometimes has to close when the truck inspection area detects a security concern. Is there a way to eliminate this impact? And I know the transportation plan is looking at this. So Matt, I think this is just more of a coordination between us and you with that plan to make sure we don't have any gaps.
Yeah, again, this is something the Air Force needs to fix, not so much the state. We're looking at, when funding allows, moving our commercial gate to off of Route 9. And this would leave room for stacking up traffic, queuing it in semi-trucks to eliminate any kind of hazard on State Route 1 and also eliminate State Route 1 being shut down. But again, we're not sure when this will happen, but we're trying to combine a commercial gate, outside of the AMC Museum in that area.
Great. So our next one, moving right along.
So Sonia, we're at about the 30-minute left point.
Okay.
So we're working
How are we
well.
doing with our timing? I think we've been under 2 minutes, hopefully.
We have for most of them, and then there's a couple
Okay.
of that have
Yeah.
been really quick that
Great.
have made up for the others. So
Sea level rise may threaten Port Mahon. This is also outside of the base's use, a very widely used boating pier. And so we want to make sure that this area is secured and that it's on the long-term and short-term, from short to long-term resiliency plans. And so I know that there has been a Port Mahon study done, and there are also plans in the works, both from a design, they have design funding, and then there's a series of grants that DelDOT will be going after to fund that design and make it a constructed project. And so I think with this one, the biggest mitigation is just to make sure that it stays in the forefront of everyone's planning and funding distribution, and that it just doesn't get lost in the shuffle. But I think that this is already in progress, and any mitigation strategy that we would think of is already in progress. And so, we don't want to not include it because it's very important to the base, and we want to make sure that, as agency representatives themselves, as personnel changes, that there is a, written understanding that this is very important and needs to be furthered. And so I think what we will do as part of this plan is just kind of wordsmith the mitigation strategies that we have, and just make sure that between DelDOT and the base and the local agencies like DENREC and others, that this is getting moved forward in terms of funding and attention. So I think that one is good, unless anyone, I don't want to move on too quickly. Anyone have any other comments on that one?
Yeah,
Just
I forwarded you an email. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was just going to say, if there was anything solid coming out of the studies as far as recommendations, to let us know so we can
Okay.
get them into the MTP
Okay.
so that they become viable.
And also, I forwarded you an email, I believe, a couple weeks ago about the Port Mahon Living Shoreline Project, part of DENREC, I believe.
Yes.
And so they're looking at that, strengthening that, and how it's making it viable, for the local area.
Okay. One thing I think we should add to that, and I don't have it, but I'm going to write it down, is to have a monitoring group for that. A lot of the MPOs are having success implementing monitoring groups where a study comes through, recommendations are made, the recommendations are in line for funding, and then this monitoring group picks up that study or that plan or that area, and just helps monitor and make sure that the goals are still being sought, and that the policy and all the projects and everything are in keeping with that plan. I think a monitoring group might be good for Port Mahon, just to make sure that it's still sort of staying in everyone's forefront. So I'm going to add that to that as well. And so then we look at flooding. So the overall, we're not seeing a huge issue. Let me remove Port Mahon from this part of the discussion. So if we look overall at the Air Force Base itself, flooding is not a major concern, but there are some areas where there have been flooded roadways, either as a result of hurricanes or very large storms, things like that. And so we just want to make sure that this is something that can be addressed if necessary. And, Matt, maybe you want to talk about a little bit, how much flooding, if at all, has affected the base, and, kind of maybe where we need or want to go with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this plan would, would fall into helping either one of our organizations. Flooding has affected the Dover Air Force Base from the St. Jones when we had tropical storms, and I think it might have been Hurricane Sandy. the base has since built up or torn down any buildings on the housing side that were affected. And from the missions operation side, we're sitting pretty good. We have good drainage and good water removal and retention. So I don't see any major issues with this.
Okay, so maybe this one goes away, but I'll touch base with you, Matt, just to make sure.
There is still the issue of the flooding up in Little Creek on Route 9.
That's true.
You know, Route 9 doesn't provide a lot of access to the base, and especially coming from the north. But there is something there.
Okay.
And in fact, that might be one of the things that we do is continue to suggest to the town that they include flooding issues in their comp plans, so we can recognize them.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so the next one, military activities and community development impact wildlife on military installations. So do we have a feeling that there is wildlife that's being impacted? So we are surrounded through certain portions of the study area with wildlife and sensitive areas that are already protected. Are there issues for them with operations that are happening on the base and vice versa? Does the base have any issues with wildlife being impacted either positively or negatively? Is this really a concern or an issue?
It has to remain an issue especially for bird strikes. And I don't know there's a lot of impact on wildlife besides bird strikes, but it's got to be an issue there.
Yeah, our BASH program does a decent job with controlling the birds on the base and off base. I'm sure you guys have seen the news, recent bird strikes that took down an aircraft. I can't remember which state that was in. But no, I don't see any significant concerns with this.
Okay, so it might just be to continue the efforts that are in place, and if landowners surrounding the base change, if they sell the property or change hands, all the requirements for BASH stay in place with the land. So the new landowner would have to also subscribe and follow all the regulations.
Yes.
And that kind of covers this one as well. This is, the landowner is responsible for BASH. So I did see in many of the easements that it did talk about this. So we'll revisit this, but I think it's really just making sure that everyone is aware of this and continuing the efforts that are in place. So the next one is really protecting environmentally sensitive land and working with DNREC and the DNERR to leverage funding and finding ways to protect sensitive areas that that really do surround the base and have not all been included yet in conservation or protected areas. And a lot of this is what we heard when we talked in our stakeholder interviews is the process for adding lands to the protected areas is completely reactive. So a landowner would need to know that these programs exist and would need to know that they needed to volunteer themselves to these programs. And so, you know, our question is, what can this plan spark to help get, at least get the word out? If we can't fully change it into proactive approaches where, you know, maybe there's maps of areas where we would like to include in conservation if possible, or if the landowner was willing, you know, maybe that's too forward. I get that. Nobody wants, you know, many people would be kind of worried about their property being on a list like that, but at a minimum, making sure that the program is, I'll say, you know, quote unquote, advertised, and that the funding is able to be leveraged. So I don't know if there's any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I participate in what's called the REPI program, REPI, and that's a readiness environmental protection program that helps DoD installations purchase easements on property within the military operations of that base. For Dover Air Force Base, that would be APZ 1 and 2 and our noise contours. So I'm able to leverage REPI funding. I have to apply for it, but if the land is within our APZ 1 or 2, I stand a very good chance of getting the funding to purchase easements on that land, and that's what I try to do with Delaware Department of Agriculture. About 6-7 months ago, we were looking at about 200 acres. And I was able to secure 400,000, but the plan ended up falling through at the last minute. But that's one of the things I would like to see included in this plan here was, you know, Dover Air Force Base has this option available, you know, to help, you know.
Okay, I'll work with you, Matt, to get that wording together.
Sure, thank you.
So there's 2 wildlife areas close to the Dover Air Force Base, Little Creek Wildlife Area and the Ted Harvey Wildlife Area, conservation easement. And so, you know, do we need to prescribe any coordination between the Air Force Base and Fish and Wildlife to assess any impacts? Is there any monitoring currently occurring? Should we, or do we need to add any monitoring? You know, what is the kind of interface occurring, if at all, on it, you know, in this kind of partnership?
You know, I guess the base always kind of relied on the county or the state to tell us if we were having a negative impact on the local wildlife. But I don't know anything from my end.
So this is Linda, Matt, and so is there any kind of regular, once a year, meet with Fish and Wildlife and assess what's going on at all? Any changes, anything? If not,
Not
maybe
that I'm aware of.
maybe that gets put in the plan.
Yep.
That sounds good. Again, the Dover Air Force Base, you know, our mission hasn't changed. Our planes have not changed. So when our planes leave the base, they go to a certain altitude, and I take it the altitude that our plane flies is what these wildlife agencies are looking at, like the noise that the plane produces and the altitude, and that's what impacts, I guess, all face wildlife, and that hasn't changed in, I don't know, man, 20 some years or whatnot.
Okay. And I think that makes sense, you know, just to kind of, if there's a yearly check-in, nothing's changed.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Everything seems, you know, maybe that's all we need.
Sounds good.
So within the project area, you know, we want to make sure that we're protecting rare, threatened, and endangered species. currently, right within our actual study limits, there are none that have been recognized. But my question is there a monitoring, does DenRec take a look at this, or does someone, does some agency take a look at this area and monitor that versus any new species that, come on or off that list? And so probably we could combine any impacts on wildlife with this very question. If once a year you're kind of doing a check-in and just making sure that nothing's changed on either side. The mission hasn't changed, our planes haven't changed, this hasn't changed. At the same time, yeah, we've done a double check of the list and there's nothing new. We don't need to account for anything new. So that might cover that.
That sounds great. And the military is known for making accommodations too. So if a new species was discovered, I heard somebody was talking about a local bat species is coming back by the Air Force Base.
Mhm.
Then the Air Force will modify, as much as we can, to make accommodations for that species.
Great. So the next one is informing property owners about programs to protect the land around military installations through easements, acquisition, or land use buffers. So, is there a yearly, public workshop or perhaps a mailer or something that goes out, something that just kind of gets a communication between the property owners around the base and the base itself that, we're here, we have these regs, we have these things in place, we have these opportunities. That could be part of the, the funding opportunities for even the conservation easements. Is there something that comes from the base at some interval, or perhaps that's something that could be put into place?
No, nothing comes from the base. And as far as acquisition, that's not going to happen. We tried to purchase, 7 acres a couple of years ago, and the Air Force told us that they're not in the business of buying land. They want to buy easements, and most of the bases they're not even buying easements anymore. They say that we already have easements for tree cutting, and for the perimeter fencing and for the clear zones and their explosive arcs. So we should not need any more easements unless our mission changed. And as far as getting easements to the REPI program, I can do that, but other than that, from the big Air Force itself, they're pretty much not involved in any kind of acquisition or future easements.
Okay. So does the group think then? Oh, go ahead, Drew.
Sonia, I was going to say that this one was also focused on, based on the stakeholder conversations we had with Department of Agriculture and DenRec, looking at their, either fish and wildlife and the ag program, understanding that those were, reactive programs, but how can we enhance that communication and information to those property owners, saying that, hey, this exists. It might be a good opportunity to come in to the program.
Right.
That would be the REPI program I was telling you about, and I'll send you the link to that. So that's one specific program, what Drew's talking about now. And yes, that's with Department of Agriculture and Fish and Wildlife. So thank you, Drew.
Yeah, they can also leverage their funding too. I think we look at REPI, we look at state funding. I know that they, like Department of Agriculture just doubled their ag land preservation funding in FY23. So it's, so I think there's an opportunity to bring a lot more farms and have a lot more competitive rates as we look at that program moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was the next issue was, how do we leverage this REPI funding? So I think a lot of these will be combined into one issue and, you know, have multiple mitigation strategies. So I think that will coordinate itself through.
Yeah, the REPI program, funding's awarded, I guess, the first of the year. It has to be decided by May. Then the Air Force submits their stuff along with other Department of Defense agencies, and then Congress looks at it and they make a final approval for who gets funding over how much money they have. That occurs yearly.
So the next one to talk about is designating a community and point of contact at the Dover Air Force Base to facilitate proactive information sharing and awareness with surrounding jurisdictions. So by surrounding jurisdictions, we mean the surrounding towns, communities, municipalities, and also the surrounding landowners, you know, kind of the larger landowners. And I think what we were thinking of this is, you know, I'm sure you have a public affairs person. I'm sure you have a contact person that someone could potentially find, but is there a point of contact that would sort of be the champion for this type of, you know, this type of plan, or this type of, you know, as this plan has 50 mitigation strategies that come out of it, you know, this person would be able to be a contact for, you know, maybe the city of Dover gets something in as a new plan, they have a question, they're not quite sure which one this would fit under, or if they need to do something more. And so, you know, they kind of come to this plan, they're like, oh, this office, this position, you know, maybe it's Matt Jordan, but, you know, is there a point of contact that would sort of be the liaison for the base to help implement this plan on anything that came up and help guide the agency, the landowner, whoever that person on the other side might be, trying to figure out what they need to do?
Yeah, that would be the Dover Air Force Base Community Planner, which is me right now. But
Okay.
if I wasn't here, if I retired or whatever, it'd be the next person in my position. So the
Okay.
community planner is also the encroachment coordinator and plan manager for the base. So they kind of the jobs kind of overlap.
Okay.
At our base, you know, I do both. At larger bases, there'll be two separate people, you know.
Okay. And do you currently sit on any either agency boards, maybe even like municipality commissions or anything, even as like even as a non-voting member, but someone who's able to voice the stance for the Air Force Base?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Delaware Aviation Advisory Council. I'm the Kent County member at large, and all I do is just listen in and voice, you know, Air Force concerns. I'm a member of the Sewer Advisory Board, the MPO. I attend their meetings as well.
Okay.
I'm invited to the Dover planning, the advisory council meetings, you know. So
Okay.
if the Air Force has any concern, that I'm allowed to speak up there.
Okay, good.
Right,
So Matt,
so
I'm gonna,
just gonna say, sorry, I was just gonna say we're just about 8 minutes left. So I don't know if we want to like zoom out and just see who the point people are for the remaining issues.
Okay.
or
yeah, that's a good. Matt, I'll talk to you about this one and just make sure we're not missing anyone. So we didn't have too many left.
No.
Let me just see what's left here. So the review process, so this one is, this is looking at all the review processes for the local jurisdictions and agencies and making sure that they're aware of who they need to contact at the airbase and when. And so I think this partners into our last discussion of making sure that the community planner, AKA Matt, is involved. And so I'll work with Matt on that one and the local agencies, you know, Dawn and the county, to make sure that we're not missing anything there.
That sounds great. And, we want to make this easy for off-base people to use by minimizing the amount of people they need to call at the base,
Yes. And this one also is the standardization review process. What we really wanted to make sure in this one is that there is a place for the Air Force Base to weigh in and what triggers those would need to be. So I'll work with Matt, Dawn, and the county for this. And I guess to a certain extent, maybe Josh, the Office of State Planning, but I think it's more, city, county. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that the city and the county does an outstanding job with keeping the Air Force Base involved. And I get emails all the time from the city and the county and the MPO, and I'm very appreciative of that.
And just to piggyback on that, when we did our stakeholder interviews, we heard the same thing, that there really are no perceived or current issues with communication. What we want to make sure as part of this plan is that we have a defined path forward and a defined policy or defined avenue so that as the personnel changes, that communication doesn't change. It's working. So we want to look at what is working and make sure that that continues over time. So then
That's
all the rest
spoken.
of
That's
these,
perfect.
all the rest of these are dealing with land uses. So I think what I'll do for these is I will work with Dawn and the county and Matt to look at which ones of these we haven't already talked about. I did get a lot of comments on these already. And so we probably do have a pretty good path forward, but I'll make sure that I circle back with them. And if there are any other questions for anyone outside of those two groups, then we will we'll reach out. But more than likely, this can be handled between Matt, Century, and city and county. So we have about
Sounds great.
4 minutes left, I think. Jen, thank you for keeping us on track. I could do this all day. Everybody's like, no. So just to reiterate, we will talk offline. I anticipate seeing lots of emails, perhaps a couple meetings, things like that. That's all good. Let's work together. And then by December 13th, if you have it sooner, fantastic. But hopefully no later by December 13th, we can kind of hammer down our mitigation strategies, what we need. A couple of them might go away, that's fine. A couple of them might get combined, that's great. And then all of that will be included into our draft report. So I will just kind of, in the very, to end this last 3 minutes, if there are any other comments, feedback, questions, anything that you have.
Thank you for everybody's time today.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up or questions. So I appreciate, along with Matt, everybody's attention to this and your continued attendance. This is what's making this plan be successful, and I appreciate all of your help. So thank you so much.
Sonia, can you just give a real quick snapshot of what the next 3 months looks like?
So yeah, sorry. So the next 3 months. So the second public workshop, which we just had, was our final public workshop. And so we're taking all of this information, including what we develop now between now and December 13th. We will have our draft report circulated at the end of December. So that will go out to the stakeholders, the agencies, the Dover Air Force Base, and the OLDCC for review and comment. The Dover Air Force Base and DoD will review it for any sensitive information, assuming we get clearance on that. Mid-January, we expect the draft report to be posted online for public comment. So that will be the community and the public's chance to review and comment on the report. There will not be a third public workshop. just the online version on our project website. We anticipate getting comments back end of January, maybe beginning of February. And then we will work through those comments, and our final report will be completed end of March. So there'll be probably some reviewing of the comments, revising some things, maybe sending some things back out, in the interim, just to make sure we've covered the concerns or questions. And then we want this plan to be finished by the end of March and in the hands of the Department of Defense and the Dover Air Force Base for their uses.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a great day, and thank you very much for your continued participation.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.